Okay, so in this one, I wanted to talk you through still shots when you're extracting renders, and some information, some very early on information about, how do you create a proper framing around your perspective, when to zoom in, when to zoom out, and some words around that. I'll definitely go into further detail in our communications course coming up, but this should hopefully give you something to go off for Align Your Studio. So perspectives, you wanted to create the best shots. Where you should take the shot and under what circumstance is relevant to your scheme, and when you should be producing certain types of shots for certain things. So consider the following as a set of rules that I really think you should understand before breaking them. Yeah, I think it's very important to know the basics first before you start, pulling them apart. Understanding the basics will then give you some authority when you do start to break the rules. And your question on those is that you go, well, this is what I was going for, and that way, that way of set of rules wasn't able to communicate what I'm trying to say here. So this is a really fantastic student work from Thailand Gao. So in this circumstance, it was about quite an intense, chaotic, haphazard, busy series of elements in her design. And so in this circumstance, in the bottom render, you can see that we're playing with hyper perspective. So things that are really heavily warped and skewed, not to a realistic representation. And even in some of the diagramming on the images up the top, those exploded axonometrics that really are breaking the rules. And Thailand did this fantastically in this course, so and had really good reasoning. This was done in 2019, so I'd be racking my brain trying to remember the reasoning, but it was a really successful scheme. But for example, you might also have a very balanced, harmonic interior space that really requires renders that also indicate this message through balanced and composed interior shots. So think about your theme. Maybe theme's not the greatest word, but think about how the design is going to be communicated and try to replicate that through the stylistic approach in your rendering. One to think about is, where do you take the shot? So as a rule, you need to jump into your space and envision that you're in that space that you've designed and you're in there taking a photo. So you've got your camera out on your phone, and you're walking around your 3D model and you're just taking shots of things. So really this means it needs to be the perspective from your eyes, from a human's eyes. A lot of the time we get shots of weird ones up on the ceiling looking down into the space and everything's kind of skewed. It's almost like you're a spider. Sometimes we get ones from the ground looking up at everything and it's almost like you're the size of an ant. It's better to pretend you're in there, standing in there. And I have a little diagram here, roughly 1.8 meters high. That's a very generic number, but roughly your height, and you're standing in there with the camera looking in, and you almost want to keep it at a perfect 90 degrees just for the first set of renders that you're doing. You can break those rules. There's rules are meant to be broken as well, and in rendering perspectives, because it's always about your stylistic approach. But I would get this one down before you start to break it. So really keeping a perfect right angle. And so you can see here that's really what nicely indicated here in Chanel Than's work. You can see, that'd be like me standing in that space, holding a camera and making it perfectly straight, and it's captured this render. Again, what your renders really need to do is to discuss the narrative, and you need to be looking at your perspectives and using them as tools for communication, not only visually, but also to talk to them and to highlight elements of the space and really use them as a way of progression to walk someone through. So you can capture all of the different moments within circulation or, terminating at a spot and taking something in. And so, you can see here that there is there are some parts of information that are missing, but more or less you can trace, I guess, some of the pieces in between these images and really get an understanding of what it's like to move through this space. You know, there's a series of thresholds, a series of doorways and stairs, and then there's also termination points. So you can kind of read these perspectives as telling the story of moving around. Knowing when to zoom in and show pieces of detail and knowing when to zoom out and understand context, I'll explain in the next one. I remembered as a student, and I've seen this with other students' work as well, that a lot of the time we'll put immense amount of time into building our 3D model and our design, and in every render we'll want to show everything or as much as we possibly can, and we're getting as much context within that perspective as possible. And sometimes this can really backfire. And I will say that the slightly like the mixture of detail shots to context shots, with detail shots being, you know, vignettes, closer, I think something closer to 80% vignette shots and 20% context shots, I feel are more effective in a design presentation. So I really, that also means, you know, building a 3D model that you don't need to design everything, and really, you know, it's better to take these detail shots. And what these detail shots do, I think, entice and tease information to the user before revealing the entire piece, you know. So it's kind of quite cool to have moments where you're zooming into detail, you're understanding and the interior from a different angle, from, you know, these mini moments, so you can analyze, you know, the materials and the lighting and the setting before you get all of the context to show you where it is within the design. So I really think it's shown super nice in these renders from Chanel. So the one on the left being a detail and the one being a context shot. And don't forget your spatial sequencing as well. So to tell us the story, it should have some type of progression. You know, in these ones, maybe we're going from exterior to interior and we walk through all of the interior spaces and the renders associated with that. Okay, thank you.